The past year has brought many changes. Some of the most dramatic ones have taken place in the tourism industry. When the industry starts to recover, important questions reappear. How to deal with the tourism paradox? How to make tourism work for the environment, the local people, and their economy. During this session, we invite you to learn, vote, and discuss. What are the challenges and opportunities for sustainable tourism after the pandemic? And how do we measure the impact of tourism on the regional economy? Welcome to the fourth and final session of Nordregio Forum this winter, Sustainable Tourism Post-COVID.
Hello, very welcome, dear audience, to Nordregio Forum, the Nordic meeting place for regional and local development, supported by the Nordic Council of Ministers. We're really excited today. We have more than 400 people signed up for this event, and we hope that many of you are with us live, and we hope to hear from you in the chat function on Vimeo, and also through Menti as we move along. My name is Åsa Ström Hildestrand. I'm the head of communications here at Nordregio, and with me today I have my dear colleague.
Pipsa Salolammi. I also work with communications at Nordregio. Warmly welcome also on my behalf.
Yes, and today's theme, as you are probably aware, sustainable tourism post-COVID. After a very booming decade in tourism in the Nordics, COVID has hit the sector hard, but also in very different ways in different parts of the Nordics. So many actors had to rethink their offers and strategies. So what could we learn from this pandemic? What should we do to move forward in a more sustainable way? These are some of the questions we will dig into today. And with us now to further welcome you and introduce the topic, we have Dr. Rolf Elmer, our new director at Nordregio. So Rolf, are you with us?
Absolutely. Thank you very much also for the kind words. I welcome you all to this concluding session of the Digital Nordregio Forum. And I hope that we can have a more physical meeting in the future, but we don't know about the pandemic yet. Tourism, as we heard, is one of the most hardest hit sectors in the industry. And what will the recovery be? What will happen? That is the topic for today. And I see that we have the highest number of participants ever participating in this session, and it means that we all want to travel again. But will we travel internationally, or will we travel locally? What will happen? That is what we are going to discuss. In my own experience, I discovered the regional tourism. Last spring, I ended up stranded with two of my sons. One came home from university and one came home from the upper secondary school, and what to do. But since they are both science interested, I say that, okay, let's go on geological excursions in Skåne. And I found out that there were volcanoes in Skåne. How many of you know that we had over 200 volcanoes in Skåne? Of course, fortunately, they are not active anymore. They are 150 million years old. So it was fantastic to take my children out doing hiking and looking at these local regional tourist objects, which I didn't know existed until I had this pandemic over me. So it's we change and we do adapt to the new circumstances. But I hope that you engage in discussions, use the tools, listen well and participate in the discussions, because this is a very interesting topic and we all want to recover as soon as possible. So thank you, Jan Åsa. Over to you.
Thank you so much, Rolf, and we're so happy to have you with us, and also everyone else. Probably quite a few more people joined us by now. So again, today's topic, sustainable tourism post-COVID. And Pipsa, please introduce our Menti.
Yes, today we will be using an interactive tool called Menti, just like in the previous Nordregio Forum online sessions. So perhaps it's already familiar to some of you, but even if it's not, it's a very, very easy tool. So please go to the address menti.com. You can use your phone or perhaps open a new browser tab. And just enter the code that you see on your screens now, and the code is also in the chat. So please go to menti.com and answer the first question. We will look at the results in a bit.
All right, so while we wait for results, let's go through today's program. We will start with two of our colleagues, Anna Karlsdottir and August Bogason, who will have the first keynote and present some of their results, maps and stats, the state of tourism in the Nordics today, but also look at specifically at some regional planning for sustainable tourism and the challenges ahead, and not least, how could we measure the economic impacts of tourism in a more effective way at the regional level. After them, we have the pleasure of welcoming Professor Arvid Viken from the University of Tromsø, the Arctic University of Norway, and he will talk about the tourism paradox and the example of Lofoten. Following that, we'll have a Q&A session where we really hope to hear from you. So just post your questions, comments, examples in the Vimeo chat, and Pipsa will take care of them, and we'll make sure to post them to our keynote speakers in the Q&A session. After that, just before 2:30, we'll have a short leg stretch for you to get that extra cup of coffee, which might be needed before we start our exciting Nordic tour and hear from local and regional examples. How did you survive the COVID experience so far within tourism? And what are the main strategies and trends moving ahead? Right, then, last but not least, as we approach 3:30 and the official program ends, we will open a Zoom meeting room where you can meet and mingle with our speakers and ask all those additional questions that you might have. All right, so 3 keynotes, Q&A session, short break, Nordic tour, and then the Zoom meet and mingle. Very, very welcome again to the program. And let's make the best of this crazy digital situation and post your questions in the chat. All right. What are the results? Who do we have here?
Who do we have with us today? Like also already mentioned, we're very excited to have over 400 sign-ups today, and it seems like in the audience we have lots of regional and local level actors. We're very happy about that. We also have a very good representation of researchers and consultants, and a nice distribution all in all, I would say. So I think we're a good bunch.
Good bunch today, for sure. All right, so thank you for responding, and we'll come back with more Menti questions. But now, let's start with our first keynotes. Our dear colleagues, Anna Karlsdottir, your Senior Research Fellow at Nordregio, with a long background in tourism research for once, and also other topics. And August Bogason, you are Research Fellow at Nordregio, and also with a deep interest in tourism and Arctic issues. So we're very excited to hear your presentation, and I know you will take turns and share this. So take it away.
Thank you, Åsa. And as has been mentioned, the last 2 decades, tourism has been constantly growing, though with regional variation. And it has become an established sector of economy across the Nordic countries, both in terms of employment and revenue. All of this comes, though, with challenges and possibilities, like you will talk about later, August.
That's correct.
In 2017, the Nordic business ministers decided for a Nordic plan for cooperation of tourism. This called for increased Nordic cooperation on tourism, and the Nordic tourism plan is valid for the period from 2019 to 2023. The business minister's priorities are competitive Nordics, innovative and smart Nordics, sustainable Nordics, and attractive Nordics. So far, this work and its publications have focused on marketing for long-haul markets and innovations. We were inspired by this and these initiatives, but our contribution is commissioned by work in the Nordic thematic group on sustainable rural development 2017 to 2020. And with this work that we've been doing, now published in 3 reports, we hope that we are shedding more light on regional development aspects of tourism. Next slide, please. Crowded airport. You've not been doing much of this the last year, eh? Hanging in a crowded airport, ready to depart to or return from traveling abroad. Will this happen anytime soon? Now, tourism, the Nordic countries have been part of this global trend of tourism growth, and tourist numbers increased enormously in some locations during past years, that is, before the pandemic hit. Next slide, please. And in some segments, next, please, more than others. Like here on this picture from Flåm, West Norway, where tourism growth generated also by cruise tourism exceeded 400% in the previous 25 years. In Denmark, Norway, Finland, and Sweden, the larger Nordic countries, tourism contributed to the economy by consuming, in example, accommodation services, food and beverage services, passenger transport services, and so forth, for between 100 billions to 300 billions in local currency in 2018, and provided from 100,000 to 200,000 full-time jobs in each country. So yes, economy matters. Next, please. And then 2020 began, and suddenly tourism plummeted. You know why. Flights were cancelled, and corridors to travels, the airports were almost empty. Numbers of passengers at Finnish airports, for example, decreased by 91% in late 2020. With rising unemployment as an effect and ailing economies, you can just imagine how this, for instance, hit Åland, where every 5th Ålander in the private sector was working in tourism and tourism-related industries before the pandemic. And with Iceland as an example, by late 2020, over 12% of the working age population were unemployed, the highest number since the establishment of the Republic. Next, please. So, mobility and travels are intertwined, but we are ending up with this situation. Next slide, please. So you may ask, with closed borders and restrictions to traveling, immense hurdles, why now? Why is tourism interesting for the Nordics now? Is it not evident? We know that this state is temporary and many people are getting impatient to move about. We also know that tourism will revive once restrictions will be lifted, but will it be business as usual? Question is, does tourism always have a positive role in community? And what can we do to make the most out of tourism? How do we secure, let's say, sustainable prosperity? So new knowledge on tourism is as much as ever needed, we feel. And in this relation, we can ask, how can we learn from the past to prepare for the future? Next slide, please. So we've made maps with some comparative, we've made maps with Nordic comparison. And we know that tourism is vital to employment, more so in certain countries than others, though. And on a national level, the share of tourism is quite similar in the Nordic countries, except for Åland and Iceland, where the share is more than double as high. In Iceland, it is especially the sector accommodation and food service activities that stands out when we measure this. And this category alone stood for 6.9% of the total employment in Iceland in 2017. On regional level, Lapland stands out in Finnish context with much higher share of employment in tourism than average rate in other Finnish regions. And so does Northern Norway counties, Zone of Fjordane in Norway, Jämtland in Sweden, Bornholm in Denmark. In this comparison, the availability of data from Faroe Islands and Greenland were unfortunately missing, so we don't have them included here. Next slide, please. Is technology...
Yeah, we're good.
Are we good? Okay, because what I'm seeing is something different from you. Okay, let's go to what about overnight stays? The map shows the change in percent from 2009 and 2019 over a decade. The orange color indicates a shrink, while bluish color indicates an increase. The bluer the color is, the larger is the increase. And the shaded color in yellow highlights the regions where international guests contributed to more than half of the total overnight stays in 2019. Now, most Nordic regions and territories have experienced an increase in the number of overnight stays during the last decade. The most dramatic increase can be observed in Iceland, with 5 of its 8 regions witnessing an increase in overnight stays over 100% in this time. And Suðurnes on the southwest coast of Iceland is outpacing with 451% increase during 2009 to 2019. Nearly all the regions and territories with more international guests have an increase in the total number of overnight stays, indicating that international inbound tourism has been playing a more important role in the Nordic tourism industry. We have Åland here as an exception, where overnight stays went down by 5% in this particular period. We've also seen that in the regions dominated by inbound tourist influx, crisis has definitely hit harder. Next, please. We've also measured the economic value of tourist influx in a Nordic comparison by using figures from the tourism satellite accounts on tourism gross value added, which expresses the importance of tourism to the economy through monetary value. Next, please. In our report on regional tourism satellite accounts for the Nordic countries, this was a work that we prepared in cooperation with the Center for Regional and Tourism Research in Bornholm, Denmark, and also in Åland. The purpose has been to introduce the potential of regional tourism satellite accounts and describe their function, strength, and weaknesses in estimating the effects of tourism on regional economies. The regional tourism satellite accounts benefits, in short, are they are especially in depopulated or economically challenged regions. There can be a value in understanding the contribution of tourism to economic development and to resolving underemployment issues. The regional tourism satellite accounts can also assist comparisons of similar regions and show the benefits of tourism. And TSAs can identify particularly profitable types of tourist activities, and this is certainly valuable in a regional comparison, which then can be promoted by policy initiatives. Maybe we should do something about this. Next, please. In Denmark, which is one of the few Nordic countries that regularly develops regional tourism satellite accounts from national tourism satellite accounts, it is my understanding that it is highly appreciated as a valuable knowledge for the regions. It is useful to know how tourism development affects individual regions and also in comparison with others. The table here to the right shows the share of employment in tourism in 2017 across the Nordic countries on a regional level that my colleagues have worked on for the other Nordic countries. And Åland stands out here, as we know, with 14.7% of employment. But in Åland, it is worth focusing on that it is mainly the category sea passenger transport that is big. Only this category stands for 9.8% of the employment. If the Nordic countries and autonomous regions were to develop and use regional tourism satellite accounts in joint collaboration, which is not happening at the moment, there would be an improved comparative basis for seeing how individual regions are doing. And maybe also a possibility to learn from other regions, which then potentially could resonate in more accurate regional policy initiatives and strategies. And now August is taking over with the regional and municipal tourism plans.
Let August continue. We would like to ask the audience another Menti question. So I ask you to go to Menti again and answer this question. In your opinion, which challenge is the biggest one for the tourism sector besides COVID? So is it lack of infrastructure and investment, perhaps seasonality and job creation, securing environmental sustainability, or ensuring economic growth and tourism, benefits the destinations, or lack of cooperation and coordination?
All right, and while we wait for your results, Anna or August, any of you'd like to answer a question? If we could have Anna and August back in the picture. Great. August, I was just curious, before you get started with your with the presentation of the regional plans, what did you find most surprising or striking in this big study that you've done? You've looked through a lot of plans.
I will of course touch upon that in a few moments, but it's probably mainly the variation in quality of the plans that we studied, tourism plans. Some are only a few paragraphs, while we also went through reports that were over 100 pages and very, very detailed. So the different variation of quality is one thing I could mention. Mm-hmm.
All right, we look forward to hearing more, but first the Menti results.
Yes, it seems that our audience thinks that securing environmental sustainability at destinations is the biggest challenge at the moment, but also ensuring that economic growth from tourists actually benefits the local people and the destinations. But I'm sure that August will also tell more about this in his presentation. What did they discover in their study? Go ahead, August.
Thank you. So in the report Planning for Sustainable Tourism in the Nordic Regions, we analyzed more than 110 tourism development plans and strategies from different rural areas. And I should also note that we started this before COVID struck, but the results are still very relevant. This was done to view the challenges and opportunities along with which visions and concerns are expressed in the regional and municipal tourism development plans. Also, to see in what ways the plans and strategies take sustainability into account. We then looked if the material does indicate any patterns or reasons for this. And the text of all this material was coded and classified with a software called NVivo. In total, 22 variables and 14 classifications were made. and then compared, and the analysis was done within variables and between variables and classifications. And the data used for this is quite extensive in the report. Also, I would also like to refer to the report, which is accessible at Nordregio's publication website for more thorough analysis, national comparisons, and more detailed information. Here I will limit my discussions to a few key findings. So next slide, please. When we look at the entire material and how the text in the plans were divided among those variables we created, we get one picture of what these tourism plans are about. The graph shows all the coded material divided among the different topics. The most mentioned topic is by far coordination and collaboration, which 14.7% of the material we coded was about. The tourism plans therefore express a wide need for more cooperation and internal collaboration in tourism matters. Other topics that were often mentioned in the tourism plans are expectations to economic growth, challenges in general, often related to profitability, being able to accommodate more visitors and secure growth, and then more specific challenges like securing local benefits from tourism, seasonality, and extending the tourism season. But topics that were less mentioned are, however, things like national resource management, avoiding negative effects of tourism, and cruise tourism. And all of these lesser mentioned topics are, however, very prominent issues in literature and debates on tourism, but they're only weakly represented in the tourism plans. The tourism plans tend to frame tourism strictly in a positive manner, but it's also important to mention that there are some excellent exceptions from this. So next slide, please. Across the entire Nordic region, economic growth and profitability of the tourism sector is most often openly presented as the end goal of tourism development. At the same time, the vast majority of the tourism strategies present sustainable tourism as the goal for future destination development. These aims for growth and expansion while developing sustainably, however, create a dilemma. And the national tourism policies of all the Nordic countries have sustainable development as an overarching theme. Sustainability is, maybe apart from our current crisis, the greatest challenge of our time. It's a key issue both in the political sphere and for the general public. And this is then presented in the regional and municipal plans. Almost 90% of the local plans mention sustainability somewhere. So on paper, sustainability is very important. And one would expect this. But a simple word count doesn't tell the whole story. Often sustainable tourism is simply presented as tourism that takes place in a less visited area, the wild nature, and no further consideration to whether the tourism development is truly sustainable or not is present. Overall, there's a great variation in how tourism issue and sustainability is represented in these plans. Therefore, we created a typology of how sustainability is treated in these plans and assigned the typology to each of the plans. So next slide, please. These maps show all the included tourism plans in our research. We have regional plans on the left and municipal and sub-regional plans on the right. They have been assigned a color based on how they were classified according to our sustainability classification. Those that had the most holistic view on sustainability are dark green. Those plans treat sustainability concerns and elaborate on them on a wide scale, including economic, social, and environmental aspects of sustainability. Furthermore, these dark green plans include an operationalization of sustainability with respect to the tourism sectors and other sectors of society. The lighter green category discusses sustainability concerns in economic, social, and environmental terms, but mainly confined to the tourism sector. The brown areas then mention sustainability, but mainly in regards to economic sustainability or the viability of tourism businesses. The gray category mentions sustainability, but only as reference to national or international goals. And then the striped areas do not mention sustainability at all. Next slide, please. So here we see the same typology, only as a chart. Around half of the plans have a holistic view on sustainability. Then more than 20% mention sustainability in reference to international goals and national policy, and 14.5% not at all. So although close to 9 out of 10 tourism plans mention sustainability, only about half of them incorporate the concept in what entails as a holistic way or holistic view of sustainability. And this is in a way strange, especially since sustainable development is a key issue in regional, national, and international policy, and highlighted by all of the Nordic countries. Also, consumers, the general public, are pressing for more sustainable behavior, and this, as a result, is also being emphasized in the business sector, which is putting great emphasis on moving towards a more sustainable behavior. The tourism sector should therefore also be moving towards a more sustainable tourism development. And again, it's important to acknowledge that in our analysis there are some excellent examples of holistic long-term sustainable plans which view tourism at larger societal and emphasize larger societal issues, include rural development issues, culture and environmental issues, and so on. Next slide, please. So further analysis of these regional tourism plans indicates some commonalities among the plans that are considered greener, if I refer back to the map, or having a more holistic view on sustainability concerns. We did, for example, look at if the plans mentioned negative effects of tourism. Not many plans discussed this, 13 out of the 110 included, but all of those 13 turned out to be among the greener plans, meaning they had a holistic view on sustainability concerns. So having experienced the negative consequences of tourism and expressing these in a tourism plan or strategy is therefore associated with a greener plan. They include the social and environmental elements rather than just the economic ones. They show that they are willing to learn from their mistakes and plan for a better future. There are fine examples of this from both Norway and Iceland, but also I would like to mention the Faroe Islands, which has taken a much more proactive approach to their tourism development, trying to limit the growth and thus limit the societal and environmental pressure which rapid tourism growth can cause. Furthermore, a more participatory and inclusive process for developing a tourism development plan is associated with a more holistic treatment of sustainability. We did categorize the plans according to how they were developed into institutionally, consultancy, and then participatory processes with tourism actors and then including non-tourism actors. And in short, 85% of those that were classified as having a holistic view on sustainability were in fact developed in these broader participatory processes, indicating that more participants in the planning process create a more holistic end product when it comes to the view on sustainability. Next slide, please. Then if we zoom in on the plans that were classified as greener and do a more qualitative analysis of them, some commonalities can also be identified. While economic aspects, increase of overnight stays, increased turnover, etc., are still very prominent in those plans, they also include other important issues for the local community and the rural development issue of the destination. Using the benefits of tourism to increase competences, skills, and education level is something that was identified in many of these plans. They also emphasize that more tourism-related jobs should and could develop into more skill-based work, which would again encourage innovation, and that positive development would then create more value both for the workers, the visitors, and the destination as a whole. The greener plans also highlight that tourism must enrich local development, benefit the local society, and have a positive effect on other industries in the destination sectors that are often
Oh no.
You can hear me now? Can you hear me now? Okay, having some technical difficulties, so I'll go back a bit. I don't know when I was cut off, but I was going to tell you that the greener plans also highlight that tourism must enrich local development, benefit the local society, and have positive effects on other industries in the destination. And these sectors or industries are often not considered to be a part of the core tourism. And examples of this can be found in most of the countries where they emphasize culture, certain qualities, perhaps the nature or physical environment of the destination, food or other experiences that can be found and are locally embedded. It's therefore about creating positive synergies between tourism and other sectors. But still, while strengthening the local entity without compromising its authenticity. Local ownership is therefore important to some regions, and sometimes even keeping the tourism companies at a smaller level is emphasized and seen as a good thing. In other plans, which do not integrate sustainability to any depth into their tourism plans, sometimes they imply or assume or take for granted that economic value stays behind where it is created. Even though this is not always the case, where larger tourism companies are often providing much of the services and leaving little behind, but at the same time, few plans address that the local environment and the cultural cost from tourism can be substantial. So next slide, please. But having said that, environmental concerns are also presented in these greener plans to a much more degree than others. Okay. Although nature and the natural environment is often commodified and seen in monetary terms, for the local concerns for the local environment are often highlighted. And sometimes these discussions evolve around infrastructure and ways to maintain nature sites to be able to accommodate more visitors, and the focus on nature preservation and environmental strain caused by tourism is very local. And often the near physical and natural environment is mainly referred to, but the greater issues of a global climate crisis are not mentioned. And it's understandable that destinations want to protect their most valuable assets, as are all rural Nordic destinations define themselves as nature sites. But at the same time, it's strange that those plans that mainly focus on economic sustainability and encourage growth do not do a better job of protecting these most valuable assets of theirs. But a few tourism plans aim for limiting visitors and contribute to a global environmental betterment of the tourism. For example, in Sogn and Fjordane in Norway, where they actually state that they should focus on domestic tourists and prioritize them because of the climate concerns caused by international tourism. So we have examples at both ends. So destination management and administration is something that is also mentioned in many of these more holistic plans. They often present certain visions for the management of tourism. While this can be complex and costly, especially in a smaller region, this is highlighted. And this also refers back to the importance of developing the tourism policies in a transparent, open and participatory process to secure that different voices are represented. That way, tourism development can serve the local community as a regional development tool, and only if it does that, it can be referred to as a sustainable tourism development. A management organ that relies on a variety of participants also facilitates better coordination and cooperation, which, as I said earlier, is the issue that is most mentioned in these tourism plans we analyzed. So, next slide, please. I would also like to add that to do this, many regions call for more guidance and tools to be able to address challenges and develop in a more sustainable way. This can then provide them with insight into the interest of different tourist groups, as well as the opinions of locals, the effect tourism is having on the different industries and sectors, and help guide tourism development in a more sustainable direction, both economically, sustainably, environmentally, and socially. The tourism plans we consider to have the most holistic view on sustainability concerns, therefore highlight the importance of balancing these three dimensions of sustainability, but often the tools and expertise available is lacking. Again, this is then addressed in the need for even better destination management and coordination at different levels. Now I will hand it over to Anna again before coming in shortly later on.
Yes. And I want to refer to one of our three reports, the report Planning for Sustainable Tourism in the Nordic Rural Regions, and where we have identified examples of challenges in a place-specific context. And due to time constraints, I'm mainly going to throw out some words here. Some of it has to do with negative effects of growing too fast as a destination and over-tourism, with tourist management challenges that remain non-solved and lead to accelerated problems. We have also examples of allemannsretten, or the right to roam, the commons that are under threat, and even some example of commodification of cultural heritage that Arvid will talk more about later. In short, the way forward is not to end up in suffering from mass tourism. I guess everybody knows that by now. But on a more encouraging note, we also know that many of the regions around the Nordics have been using this time, this pause, to reconsider their strategies and reorient to more sustainable practices. A recent survey from Iceland, next slide, shows that over 42% of the tourism industry has been using the time preparing for more sustainable strategies, in fact. There are also numerous challenges associated with cruise tourism that I will not talk more about into depth, but I want to stress that in spite of the negative effects associated with cruise tourism in many regions where it starts to dominate and outcompete other segments of tourism, it is rather important tourism segment for remote and coastal regions. And for islands and remote destinations, we may not forget that connectivities, whether seaborne or airborne, are preconditions for developing tourism. And I think in the Nordic comparison, Greenland is the place and the territory that is specifically challenged when it comes to this. Next slide. While visitors are drawn to beautiful and unique places of nature, there is service labor behind the scenes that secures the hospitality services, while the tourism sector often while the tourism sector often provides needed entry jobs for youth and migrant labor, we have in the past seen too many examples built on exploitative practices towards this vulnerable part of the labor force. And this should absolutely be avoided as a vision in the revised strategies. Tourism offers opportunities and innovation and complements traditional occupations. On an encouraging note, we have several examples where the human capital coming with migrant labor and lifestyle entrepreneurs that reinvents places, provides innovations within sectors related to tourism, and brings new connections to an area in decline. So, August, you want to tell us something about the lessons learned from the analysis of tourism plans?
Yeah, just kind of a short breakdown of what we can take away from our analysis of the Nordic rural development plans for tourism, or lessons learned, or examples of best practices that lead to a more holistic view on sustainability when it comes to tourism plannings. These greener or more holistic plans are almost exclusively developed by many actors, and not just tourism actors. They also highlight the importance of the destination's administration. They include environmental, social, and economic aspects of sustainability within and outside of the tourism sector. And they try to balance these three dimensions of sustainability in a long-term sustainable perspective. They also want to create synergies between different sectors, industries, and the interests of locals and visitors. And they call for more collaboration and coordination. And this can be divided in three different ways. They call for more collaboration and coordination. It's between different levels of public authority, between tourism actors, often within the region that the plan refers to, and then between authorities, tourism stakeholders, and non-tourism actors. They also see tourism as provide a possibility for competence development and increasing skills, and they call for more guidance, more info, and better data to be able to develop in a sustainable way. So these are all lessons that could be taken and should be taken into account in future tourism planning. And we should also stress that many of the plans we included in this research expired in 2020 or thereabouts, so some of them were quite old, and a lot of regions and places are in the process of developing new plans, which of course has then maybe changed because of the current situation, but these findings are definitely something that should be taken into account when planning this.
Thank you. And just very shortly, on a short note, what are then the prospects for recovering tourism sector? Around there is, of course, now an understandable impatience to go back to normal. Experience the rebirth, next slide, or maybe more rightly the revival of tourism. And there is both uncertainty and excitement of how this will evolve. A bit like waiting for the return of the sun, here visualized in Odd Nerdrum's fabulous paintings. But there are many uncertainties associated with probable changed behavior of travelers, and the value shifts that may have happened during this crisis among people who will be traveling in the near and farther future. So this has to be taken into account. While there are businesses that may not survive this crisis, unfortunately, and we can foresee quite a bit of rationalization within the tourism sector in the period to come, there's no reason to believe anything else than tourism will thrive again, benefiting various regions in the Nordic countries in different ways. Next slide. The importance of looking ahead and rebuilding tourism brings the question, what is needed to do so? The tourism industry should look ahead to longer time horizons beyond only next year and revival. There's a likelihood of shift in focus from boosterism that has characterized many strategies, as August mentioned, focusing on growth, to a focus that is more preoccupied with worth and value added for communities involved. There is also a likelihood for shift in incentives of traveling with a stricter sanitary conditions and even vaccine certificates and even digital corona passports. These hurdles may have an effect in longer stays, which is beneficial and much different from the extended weekends far away that had become quite common among Nordic citizens before COVID hit. Nature will continue to be the magnet with its various fantastic, fabulous, stunning and beautiful landscapes. We may see revival of less is more, slow tourism, domestic and local tourism, as Rolf mentioned, and as many destinations in Finland, Sweden, Iceland and Norway experienced the summer 2020. It all depends. Hopefully our reports can give more insights and maybe some good ideas for the upcoming revival. And next slide. They are available at our website. And by this, I want to thank you for your attention.
Thank you. Thank you, Anna and August. Now we're just quickly going through the third Menti question that I asked you in the chat to answer, which many of you already took the time to do, so thank you. So in your opinion, which of these measures are the most effective ways forward? And whether you disagree or agree. And it seems like a national level monetary support seems to gain popularity among this audience, but also maintaining infrastructure and perhaps diversifying tourism products seems to be something that people strongly agree would be a good way forward. Thank you.
Also this regional development strategy, yes, focus on other industries. Okay. Yeah, this is super interesting. We'll come back to that soon, and we'll also very soon introduce our next keynote speaker. So let's see, should we just give a few more seconds to this? All right, before we see the final results here, I could say a few words about our next speaker. And Arvid Viken is a professor, as I mentioned earlier, at the University of Tromsø, which is also called the Arctic University of Norway. And he has studied tourism and tourism development and impacts of tourism in local communities for many, many years, since the 1980s, and has a lot of thoughts on the paradoxes and contradictions between growth and sustainability, and really how to manage the social environmental strains from tourism. Before we enter or we welcome you, should we see again? Do we have any changes in the results?
No, to me the results seem to be following the exact same line as previously.
Yeah. All right. So I think it's very interesting that we do have the idea of maintaining infrastructure and working with innovation as the top one. And I think that also rhymes with what you have seen in your studies, Arvid. So very welcome on screen here with us, and tell us more about the paradox and the developments you have studied and noticed in primarily Lofoten, but also other Arctic destinations over the years. Very welcome, Arvid.
Thank you. Okay. I don't see my presentation, but okay. Thank you for inviting me. Well, it's a big job to answer all those questions that are in the titles, but and particularly in 15 minutes. But I'll do my best. Could I have the next slide? My perspective will be both on global and local conditions. Tourism is a global phenomenon, and it is more or less done on a local level. So, and the local level will be Lofoten, and Lofoten is in the northern part of Norway, and it's it's a group of islands connected with a road all the way to Oslo, if you want. So next, and next. I start with next, please. I start with this claim that sustainable tourism is a sort of an oxymoron, something of a contradiction. to start with, I would say that tourism, in a way, is unnatural. It's nothing that is made from nature. It's therefore unnatural. It is actually what is natural is that we are staying where we are born and not go to all over the world places. Most places do, in fact, not have the capacity to accommodate all people from all over the world at the same time at the same place, and tourism is actually inviting for that in a way. So tourism is always representing a pressure on nature and culture. It can't actually go on without setting some sort of a phrase. That is why I come up with this statement that sustainable tourism is impossible. It is some sort of a contradiction. But still, to not being that negative, I will pose the question, can it be sustainable in some way or another? Next, please. To start with, I would go a little bit back to about sustainability. It's a term we have known since the late 1980s, and maybe a bit before. But in the decades before 1980, there was a focus on environmental problem, for instance, waste, and it was related to limits of growth. How far can we grow in this modern society? And to give an answer to that, the UN made a report called the Brundtland Report, which actually came up with some sort of a solution. Yes, we can go on growing, but we also have to grow in an environmentally friendly way, it was said. So actually, this Brundtland Report was some sort of a compromise between the environmental concern and the growth philosophy and the way the world was developing at the moment. And this compromise was very much welcomed in industries all over the world, and also in governments and among politicians. We could go on growing, but we should take care of the environment and natures and cultures at the same time. And there were lots of positive impacts of this new philosophy. It created an awareness of issues that the public and maybe also governments had not been focusing very much earlier. And it became a legitimate way to develop, to grow. So the growth paradigm was actually acclaimed. Next, please. But then, what is, and since this late 80s, there has been a growth all over the world in most sectors. And it is growth in interactions and in trade, more global companies and finance, international ownership of local industries and firms, and in the tourism sector, more international travel and tourism. And it has also become a concern to have a control of the tourism industry worldwide. And more actually use of local tourism resources by companies from abroad or from other places. In fact, tourism is a sector where often the values are created locally, and the profit goes to the financial sectors. I have an example of that. Next slide, please. In North Cape, where this question has been posed for quite many years: who shall have the profit from the tourism production? Is it only the investor who actually owns the facilities up there? What about the local community? And who should actually manage the place? As it has been until these days, it has been the hotel chain that has been in charge for these things, and the money from this place go to investors, and actually situated in London, I think. So this is part of the picture. And next, please. Something at a certain point went wrong. Too much travel, over-tourism, congestion, invasion of local communities, perversion of nature, environmental degradation. You know all these terms that have come up, and they have come up because there are something going on in the field. And something also going on in the field is anti-growth sentiments and movements, anti-tourism sentiments and movements. And we actually know them from Norway. We know them from Flom, that was mentioned earlier today. People who oppose to the tourism development. But of course, there are also very many claiming the development. What has also shown more recently is that one of the problems with all this traveling is the transmission of viruses. The COVID-19, traveling with travelers, that is also part of this. And one of the conclusions might be that there are too much growth. Next, please. I go to Lofoten, which is a lovely place or a lovely region, and it has been a bit in the focus and in Norwegian media, and it's blamed to be too much tourism, too much congestion, and problem with tourism. Actually, I don't quite agree. It's also a place where they have put this on the political agenda and solved many of the problems, but I'll come back to that. The next, please. In the 1980s, Lofoten were primarily with a place with rugbrød, fishermen with cabins, and it was a nice atmosphere, and not many experienced providers, for instance. You had to do your tourism on your own, and there were no cruise tourism, and basically small and medium-sized enterprises were dominating the place. Today, the picture is quite different. National and international hotel chains, externally owned companies, including the rugbrød, cruise tourism, and also commercial experience provider. There is a real tourism industry. It's not only accommodation, it is industry in its full breadth. And cruise tourism. it is a growth-driven industry that we have in Lofoten. Next, please. We have these cruise ships also there, but it's quite well organized as the cruise harbor is out of settlements and you have to go by bus. But it's there and it's quite crowded in the fishermen villages at some time. Okay, next. The growth impacts in Lofoten is concentration of ownership and power, external ownership, also in the rural sector, as I mentioned. The infrastructure, particularly the roads, are not dimensioned for the top tourism season, which is, in fact, maybe also the reason why Lofoten somehow has got a bad reputation. It's a place that tourists are queuing, which is actually due to the narrow roads that are also. So the roads are not have not dimension for the peak season, one could say. But the peak season is 5-6 weeks. Congestion of people in the summer season there is, and particularly it is a problem for the Robu owners when the cruise ship empty their ships and go to all these fishing villages with 1,000, 2,000 tourists, villages that are with 200 local inhabitants. And there are also some erosion problems here and there. So we have lots of these more or less negative impacts that tourism can have. But next slide, please. There is also a positive side. Tourism, Lofoten is approved as a sustainable destination by Innovation Norway, which is a industry development organization. But anyhow, it tells that they have been working on sustainability in one way or another. What has also happened is that we have got all year tourism in the region, and we have also very many who are arguing for local ownership, but there are very many temptations for those owning when the people come with 50 million and want to buy a Robu on leg. Okay, and further, there are many sustainable tourism projects, vista management project, construction of paths, a Sherpa stair is developed, local food project, establishing Lofoten guideline is one project, and there are several educational offers available during the years. So the and I also would add that there is a discussion going on among people in relation to planning and in media of how this should be developed. And are we satisfied with all the ways we are developing tourism in the region? And of course, people are not. There are many opinions about this issue, but. All in all, I think we could say that Lofoten is an example of a quite good visitor management system in a way. However, and that is my conclusion actually. Next. There still are problems, but if you go to this UN slogan, think globally, act locally, well, Lofoten could be a an example of the fact that it is possible to do this. And I would also say there are possibilities to make tourism more environmentally friendly, and Lofoten might also be an example of that. But it is also an example of some problems that are difficult to overcome. That tourism has grown more than many would say it should, and that this has given quite a lot of problems, which have to be solved in the future if it still is going to be sustainable in one way or another. Next. Thank you.
Thank you, Arvid. That was your last slide, and I hope you all saw the title of the book there, The Tourism Paradox, which is available obviously in Norwegian, but perhaps also other languages, Arvid. Is it available in English, your book?
It's only in Norwegian.
It's only in Norwegian. Anyway, I'm sure many of you who listen today are also familiar with Norwegian language. So anyway, thanks again. Let's jump over to a Menti question, and stay tuned, Arvid, for more questions to you as well.
Yes, before we ask more questions from our speakers, we would also like to get the audience's perspective on things. We would like you to answer the following Menti question. Estimate the likelihoods in 2022. Will tourism go back to normal? Or perhaps will tourism grow to the highest level ever seen? Or have the preferences changed and tourism destinations should not expect to go back to business as usual? So we look forward to hearing your thoughts on this. But
yeah, and while we wait for you to answer, Arvid, can we come back to you and ask you these same questions? You've studied tourism a very long time. What are your thoughts, reflections for the future? Do you think tourism will bounce back or even get stronger and bigger, or actually slow down a bit?
Well, if I had more time, I would have developed a little bit more on my conclusion. And I probably would say that one of the issues now is actually to discuss that issue. Should we continue as it was, or should we ask questions about this tourism as I claim is unnatural? Mm-hmm. Should we go back and travel less? Actually,
what do you think? You're really a grand old man in this. We trust you. What do you think? What would you say from your experience?
Well, I have been traveling all over the world, so I probably shouldn't.
You're a super tourist yourself.
I shouldn't say that this has to change, but I think it has to change in very many ways. And I think it's very important to take that question seriously. Could we proceed in the same way, or do we have to change our habits somehow? And actually, we have this last year we have changed our habits, and it goes very well actually for most of us without traveling to Hawaii or wherever.
Yeah, we'll come back to this question. Let's see what the audience thought. And stay with us, Arvid.
Yeah, it seems that the audience are with you, Arvid, on this one. The preferences have changed according to our audience. Of course, none of us have a crystal ball, so it's hard to see into 2022. But according to this, yes, we should not expect business as usual after COVID.
Interesting. Thanks again for contributing to our Menti poll, and also for asking lots of very relevant questions in our Vimeo chat. So please continue to do that as we get started with the Q&A session. So let's hope that we now have all our 3 keynote speakers on board, and let's start with maybe a first question from us before we see what's in the chat, or while Pipsa checks the chat. So this environment economy dilemma that you've all touched upon, and that we're eager to see more growth, but at the same time, the environment and also maybe socially we do pay a price. What do you say? I mean, you didn't have so much time to dig deeper into this, but do you think tourists actually should just pay more? Is that a way forward to have more of sort of targeted fees for maintenance, or work the Faroese way that we'll hear more about to also engage tourism in maintenance? Or would you like to comment on that? Who would like to start? Anna, yes, please.
I maybe continued from Arvid's problematization of tourism ever being, possibly being sustainable. I think I want to allow myself to address critic to aims for the long-haul markets. I'm thinking here of Asian tourists. I'm not sure that after this we should aim for these long-haul markets if it's on the condition that you have 3 days in Scandinavia visiting 5 countries or something like that. It's simply nothing that will benefit us in the long run.
Arvid, do you agree, or how do you think of this? And maybe there's a specific example also from Lofoten in this regard, how they manage tourism with more fees.
Unfortunately, no, because it has been suggested through 30 years now to have a fee, and it's quite simple to administer because there are islands, so it wouldn't be difficult to do it. But those who are against are the what's they called NHO, the industry organization, the organization organizing all sorts of industry in Norway. They are against it, and they are influencing the politicians, so they say no to this. And to me, it's a silly no, because they could have solved quite a lot of problems in Lofoten if they had this tourism tax. My opinion on that is that places with special pressure should be introducing such taxes, or but not in general, maybe.
Okay.
At least what does this work? Because we are all, as Norwegians and Swedes and wherever you are from, traveling all over the world and putting a pressure on infrastructure to other societies. So we shouldn't have it all over, I think, but places with a special pressure should buy.
August, I would just like to hear a comment from you as well. Did you see in any of these plans, did anyone dare to put out this as an option to actually increase funding for maintenance through some extra fees?
Yeah, it's an important discussion in many plans where the issue is relevant, like in Lofoten regions, in Iceland as well. But it also touches upon this delicate culture or heritage, which is called public right of access, or the right to roam, or allemannsretten in common Scandinavic terms, which is of course an ancient right that allows anyone and everybody to travel without any restrictions through the countries. And there are a lot of debates about this as well. A lot of regions say that it's necessary to put up some sort of tourist tax, especially in the most congested regions, simply to maintain them so they don't get ruined. But as Arvid says, there are then other actors that are very much against it. But it's not widely discussed, but where it is discussed, it is very debated and a heated issue.
And I think also if you look around in the media in each individual Nordic country, you will see quite vivid discussion appear again and again, and actually have been so in the last 15 years with discussion of if to implement fees, if to implement zoning, what are the nature protection measures we can take. Should we declare the Highlands of Iceland national park, etc., etc.? This is a very vivid discussion around in the Nordics.
Yeah. Thank you all. I think that's really interesting to hear, and I'm sure that this discussion will also, keep floating there. And we'll hear more from the Faroes soon as well. And you probably all heard about their ideas as well when they closed the Faroes for maintenance and gained a lot of interest through that as well, which was an interesting, creative step. So Pipsa, please, let's hear what's in the chat.
Yeah, there are lots of questions in the chat, and we do not have time to go through all of them, but I'll just try to pick and choose a couple of them, and then you'll get to meet the speakers at 3:30 in the mingle and ask more. But here is one. Perhaps this is most for August. Why is that the regional sustainable tourism policies do not reflect at the sub-regional level? And also whether you saw any actors hindering the adoption of sustainable tourism policies from the regional to the sub-regional level. So did you have any experience on that in your studies?
This is not something that we look specifically into, so I would only be guessing here, but my main assumption or explanation would be that tourism is simply a very complex industry or sector. It touches on so many topics and so many sectors. There is no one ministry or public authority that has a total overview. I mean, it has to do with agriculture and food and transport and labor market and almost every single ministry at the governmental level. Then you have the regional levels, and then the municipal level, then the public-private partnership. So, and this just reflects upon what was most often mentioned in the reports, this coordination and collaboration. And this is simply a complex sector that touches upon so many things. It affects so many things and is affected by so many things. So naturally, it is hard to maintain active dialogue and to have flow of international or national policies to regional level and regional policies down to municipal level and so on. So without us looking particularly into this, I would simply explain it by stating and referring to the complexity of tourism and tourism development.
Thank you, August. Next one would be for Arvid. In Lofoten, it seems that the role of the local community has achieved certain power to push for more sustainable tourism path. And have you identified any specific processes that the community followed to achieve enough power in the local tourism sector? So how did that happen?
Well, it has happened over a very long time period. Also the awareness of tourism and its implication has been developed through the years, including, of course, also the municipalities and the politicians. But there's always someone claiming that it goes too slow and so on. But things are happening, and it is a complex system. So the road authorities, for instance, have done quite a lot recent years to accommodate along the roads, and other local communities have also done things. But and there is some sort of a common understanding that we have to manage the region also concerning tourism, I think.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. This is also an interesting one. Is there a conflict of interest between mass tourism and making sure we develop a more sustainable industry? Perhaps August or Anna would like to comment?
Yes, I think there is an imminent conflict in between different stakeholders in the industry, and I think I'm hoping in terms of cruise tourism that what we will see is smaller cruise vessels, and not this continuous development of humongous cruise vessels coming in more numerous calling ports. But then on the, I think we have some very interesting stakeholders in the tourism industry who are low-key, who are small family companies, and this is probably, or one-man companies, probably the bulk of the tourism industry in the Nordics. So yes, there is an imminent conflict in between smaller and larger, not to say humongous, stakeholders in the industry.
And I could also add that it's kind of a contradiction also sometimes when you see in the plans that there is demand for increased profitability and making the business more lucrative and cutting down on costs, and that in some instances would mean that larger companies would simply take over the smaller ones. So that's also a conflict, especially because a lot of the smaller regions state that they appreciate the smaller actors. They are more responsible, they have more local knowledge, and also economically more stays behind at the destination in question. So definitely some conflicts there.
And we have also large multinational enterprises in tourism industry, and this is one of the paradoxes in tourism, that tourism is a global industry.
Yeah. I think we have time we can shorten the break a little bit, so let's have one more question, Pipsa, if you had another one that was from in there.
The final question is actually for our audience. It's a Menti question. We would still like to know, where would you like to travel next when it is safe and allowed? So please answer this final Menti question, and then we're off for a short break.
Yeah, but I would like to ask one more thing before, and it's a thing we haven't touched upon, but that is actually a big challenge for all across the Nordics, and that's the seasonality. Or you touched upon it in Lofoten, but I would just like to hear just a few words. What have you seen in your research that are innovative ways around the seasonality and how to expand the seasons? Are there any takeaways there that you would like to share on innovative ways to go beyond this very short season of 6 weeks in the summer?
I can answer to that. You have to provide northern lights.
Ah, right.
That has been the successful factor in northern areas of Norway and Finland, at least. So,
very true. Yeah. Okay. Exploit the northern lights more. Anna and August, what would you say?
We have, I think, a fairly good experience from Iceland in extending the season to almost whole year, adding event tourism and business and conference tourism also as element into the tourism industry. But it remains to see if that will rebound, if we are all going into digital meetings in the future.
That's the thing. Big COVID effects on those ones. All right, let's now have a minute or 3 minutes break, I think, and then we will be back and do our Nordic tour. Thank you so much to our great keynote speakers, and thank you, dear audience, and we'll be back very soon, 3 minutes from now. Thank you.